T-minus 10, 9, 8,
The clock is
7.
operating. We're underway.
Tranquility Base here. Endeavor, go and throttle up.
Arbeit im All heißt meistens Spaziergang, obwohl es mit Sicherheit keiner ist, wenn man mitten im freien, luftleeren Raum schwebt und Sonnensegel auf eine schwebende Raumstation montiert. Nein, das ist harte Arbeit und die haben die Astronauten der ISS erfolgreich beendet. Ab jetzt hat die Raumstation genug Strom für 6 Dauergäste, doppelt so viele wie bisher. Gut so, denn im russischen Baikonur scharren schon die nächsten Anwärter ungeduldig mit den Hufen. Darunter ein Weltraumtouri, der schon zum 2. Mal Urlaub im All gebucht hat. All inclusive. Stefan Xander berichtet.
Charles Simoni war schon einmal im All und er will wieder dorthin. 60 Millionen $, so viel Geld sind dem amerikanischen Software-Millionär die beiden Flugtickets zur ISS insgesamt wert. Ich liebe den Duft in dieser Rakete, es riecht wie in einem neuen Auto. Am kommenden Donnerstag soll Simonis zweite Allreise in der Soyuz-Rakete mit dem russischen Kosmonauten Gennady Padalka und dem amerikanischen Astronauten Michael Barrett starten. Wegen des Raumflugs war ich beim ersten Mal nicht angespannt und jetzt bin ich noch weniger nervös, weil ich weiß, was passieren wird und den kompletten Ablauf schon kenne. Die jetzige Besatzung der ISS verrichtet derweil letzte Wartungsarbeiten auf der Raumstation. Am Freitag hatten die Astronauten das 4. und letzte Paar Sonnensegel entfaltet. Damit ist die Stromversorgung der ISS nach jahrelanger Aufbauarbeit vollständig. Jetzt ist eine Leistung von 120 Kilowatt verfügbar. Das entspricht dem Energieverbrauch von 50 Haushalten. Und das ist enorm wichtig. Bereits im Mai soll nämlich die Langzeitbesatzung der ISS von bisher 3 auf 6 aufgestockt werden. Und ohne die von den zusätzlichen Solarflügeln gelieferte Energie gäbe es auch nicht genügend Strom für den Betrieb des europäischen Weltraumlabors Columbus und des japanischen Labors Kibo.
Pyongyang says the Taepodong rocket seen here at the test launch in 2006 will put a satellite in space. But the US fears it is a long-range missile that could reach as far as Alaska. Live now to Washington and the BBC State Department correspondent Kim Gattas. Kim, what confirmation and what kind of rocket?
Well, what we're hearing in Washington is that US counter-proliferation officials are saying that they are indeed seeing North Korea move forward in its plans to launch this missile, which Pyongyang says it's part of its space program, but Washington and its allies believe is a missile launch that would be, not something that anybody wants to see happen. They're seeing North Korea move forward. North Korea has announced that it's going to launch this missile on April the 4th. They have now placed the long-range missile on a launch pad, so they're not listening to the warnings coming out of Washington, but also coming out of Tokyo, that they should not go ahead with whatever this actually is. Of course, there are discrepancies. Everybody has a different theory, but they're not listening to the warnings coming out of Washington. Very stern warnings we'd heard from Hillary Clinton saying there will be measures taken against Pyongyang. And of course, the Japanese today have also said that they would prepare to bring down this missile if North Korea went ahead with launching this missile. A lot of tension building up on the Korean peninsula there over the last few weeks, and there's a real possibility for a flare-up.
This is in violation of UN sanctions introduced in 2006. Is it being seen in Washington as a first test on North Korea for the Obama administration?
Well, what everybody here feels is that North Korea is trying to grab the attention of the Obama administration, that this is why they've been saber-rattling, this is why they're threatening to launch this missile. They want the Obama administration to engage with them. On the other hand, when you look at North Korea's behavior over the last few weeks, they've not responded to the overtures that Hillary Clinton and other US officials have made towards North Korea. And in fact, Hillary Clinton recently said that they were very disappointed that North Korea had not invited the US envoy to the region, Stephen Bosworth, to visit Pyongyang when he was traveling around the region. So a lot of posturing by North Korea and expectations here in Washington that engagement with Pyongyang is going to be much more difficult than they thought.
The BBC's Kim Gattas in Washington. Thanks, Kim, for that.
Die Raumfähre Discovery ist auf dem Weg zurück zur Erde. In der Nacht dockte das Shuttle nach 13 Tagen im All von der Raumstation ISS ab und machte sich vor dem spektakulären Panorama der Erdkugel auf den Heimweg. Die 7 Astronauten werden am Samstag in Florida zurückerwartet. Die Besatzung der ISS bleibt aber nicht lange allein. Schon heute startet von Russland aus eine Raumkapsel Richtung ISS. Mit dabei der US-Millionär Charles Simonyi. Er ist der erste Weltraumtourist, der die Station zum 2. Mal besucht.
У нас времени мало. У нас времени достаточно. Дата какой? Юль, не фотографируешь, да?
Мне сказали, что фотограф.
Андрей, сбоку стоит и тебя фотографирует.
Turn this way a little bit, Mike.
Число, да.
Nice and slow.
Туда. Чарльз. Девочки отошли.
У меня.
Тогда уходи. Повернется, он уходит. О чем мы говорим? Что в кадре и вхожу? Буду рассказать.
Они нас делали сквозь ваши молитвенные деньги, вот они будут пребывать с вами, Господь помогает. Помоги, Господи.
Спасибо.
Удачи!
Счастливо! Счастливо! Так, где моя девчонка? Давай. Нету девчонок. Блин. Чего?
Sorry, man.
All right, thank you. See ya. Идите сюда. Красиво.
Шапка. От автобуса, отойди, ну автобус отъезжает, мешаешь автобусу. Отойди, сейчас твои. Уйди с камеры, пожалуйста.
Скажи, что не начали.
От автобуса отошли все.
слышу тебя.
Под солнышком пойдет, говоришь?
Нет, нет. Не будет зонтика.
Перед тем, как переходить в бетон, ходить надо.
Ага. Не серьезно. Не серьезно.
Плащи возьми.
Революционеров?
Да.
Ну, нормально. Да не, она мягкая. Ее чуть.
Геннадий, здесь еще не будет укладышей.
Прекрасно. А укладыша не будет, еще меньше.
Ну, еще меньше будет.
I'll take the glasses.
Попробую.
Желательно чехол. Желательно чехол.
Чехол?
Okay.
Смотри.
Да.
Может быть, сюда, Майк.
По-моему, для меня это лучше так.
Лучше, да?
Да, как на тренировке.
Футляр, может быть,
No.
я взял футляр. Да,
Ну, у меня есть футляр, но только для первых использований. Это не просто, потому что мне сразу нужно. Даже до того, как я ложусь, это не проблема. Да. Это всегда, это обязательно работает немного. Не проблема.
It's always like that. No problem.
I'd rather not take another case if I don't need to, but this is what I always do.
А там он Джесси предлагает.
Ну, это просто, я всегда. Да. I don't want to take another thing if I don't have to. Now that there's tons of attention, why don't we wait just a second?
You have a reserve pair in the bail?
What's that?
You have a reserve?
The only thing that's ever happened is that they slipped out of his pocket once. Alright. Flashlight. He's got to rep that? Yes? Alright, that's fine.
Just takes it just a second to recycle.
Very good. Very good. I thought I explained it by name what I was doing. They're kind of protected by the glove layers. Long as the Velcro is solid. What's that?
And then when you're in the SI, you take them out, you're going to leave them in the SI? I mean, when you,
I'm going to leave them on until we go to mail.
yeah, then you just leave them in the SI.
Right. Exactly.
And the rest of the whole
Yeah.
6 months.
Yeah. The 6 months. You kept them right there. Okay, that's a great idea.
You know, just
Actually,
to
that
have
is
what I needed.
Yeah.
It gives me an issue.
Yeah. So that becomes a storage place for my. It's starting to sink in, just in case you're wondering. Well, I won't be coming to this side. I felt like I knew. I said, it's funny, we love this so much. That's just the commute to work. I compartmentalize really well. I've learned that over the years. That's why I haven't been nervous. I don't think I'll get overtaken, but that's the predominant. Well, it's because he's already had flight experience.
Maybe station, 6 months, everybody. But I didn't worry about it.
I've never used it myself.
I never took a scratch on it. But I usually
Все, закончили.
like I told you, really appreciate it.
В смысле? Ты там на стуле кто сидит у нас? На стуле ты сидишь? Так, теперь мне нужно... Володь, кто там? Трое. Трое? По делу.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Is that your brother there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what about the guy behind the beard taking the picture?
Well, that's it.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, doing great.
Getting out of the way.
Oh, yeah. С кем ты там гребешь? Володя? Давай попробуем. Давай попробуем.
Shall we try putting it on?
Да, 0,1 и меньше 90, но 3,03. Тут, там и там, понятно.
А, вот, у нас победитель. Скажи, как камера?
Вот так, молодец.
Маленький.
Маши скорее, маши скорее.
Wave at him, wave at him.
Снимающие на старте, внимание. Просьба освободить помещение.
Attention, please. Please vacate the premises.
Кто выезжает на старте?
Давай двигайся нам на одну.
Три-четыре все помахали быстро. Все. Спасибо, моя Господи, большая.
Все подготовились пока? Да? Молодцы. You all got to do it. Дочка командира, вы визитку не забыли? Just at the beginning, don't worry. А, нет, нет, подождите, посмотрите на меня.
Поговори.
Его видеокамера настоящая. Звуковой.
Very handsome in those spaces. Been a Hollywood She'd like to wish you a very good flight and another flight.
We're taking advantage of the free mic night here, so.
Good, good. Ready to fly?
I think there's a rocket out there with our name on it, so whether we're ready or not, we're gonna go fly it. Great to have everybody.
You guys look great. Look. How does it feel to get on the shoot for the first time, Mike?
Well, it's not quite the first time, but I do know that the next time I take it off, I'm going to be a long way from here, so that's kind of a strange thought. Feels good. It fits.
You get 10 points for admin.
Dad, I love you and I'm gonna miss you.
I already missed it. Whether or not you do everything, I think. Yeah, thank you guys for the message. The video was really great. The guys in my family are shy.
Чтобы никогда вы не потерялись в космосе.
We hope we don't get lost in space.
И вообще, чтобы никакой аварии не было.
And in general, may there not be any emergency.
Oh, there's a launch after this?
Hey, hey,
Поэтому прежде всего я хотел бы поблагодарить экипаж.
First of all, I would like to thank the crew for their very good training.
Твердая уверенность, что экипаж
We have firm confidence that the crew, under the lead of the commander, possess all the necessary qualities to conduct the mission, the launch, the docking, and the work on orbit. Thanks to such experienced crew members, they will be able to perform the work. That's why I would like to give the floor to Vitaly. Well, you know the program, and I try to be shoulder to shoulder and provide support when necessary.
The space station is ready for you. The space shuttle is docked last night. And enjoy the space station. Take good care of it. And have a great expedition.
Первое место – это эмблема нашего экипажа.
First place is the patch of our crew.
Из Москвы, да?
Anna, are you from Moscow? I would like to wish that you perform all that is planned. Or rather that what is planned will be performed. We'd like to wish you all the very best. Good luck. And I don't really know for Barrett, probably for him to like everything because it's his first time. And this first time not be the last one. We'll work as much as we can. I don't have lots of words to say. I'd like to say that we are ready to perform the flight. We're fully ready. And if everybody is ready, then we should start.
And I'm very optimistic for a great mission.
And at the end, thank you very much for the support to all the facilities and all the specialists involved. The crew are ready for launch. Thank you for the report. Good luck. Good luck. Good luck.
Look!
Только руками. All together! Charge! Charge!
Everything's fine. Okay, we're off.
Charge! Ребят, еще раз на нас! Charge! Charge!
Back at the launch site, continuous checks are made of spacecraft systems as the countdown proceeds on schedule. Liftoff is set for 6:49 a.m. Central Time, or 13 minutes 30 seconds from now. Launch is precisely timed for rendezvous and docking with the station on Saturday. At the time of today's launch, the station will be orbiting over the south-central Atlantic Ocean, northeast of Montevideo, Uruguay. Launch time in Baikonur will occur at 5:49 p.m. Soyuz telemetry systems and steering jets have been activated. During the climb to orbit, tracking and telemetry is downlinked to ground stations along the flight path and is routed to the Mission Control Center in Krylev outside of Moscow. There, Russian Flight Director Yuri Saryakov oversees a group of flight controllers ready to begin monitoring the Soyuz following its launch and insertion into orbit. A group of Moscow-based U.S. flight controllers known as the Houston Support Group are led by Steve Quenville and are joined by veteran NASA astronaut Mike Foale. The HSG, as the group is known, interfaces with Russian counterparts for cohesive real-time operations. Here in Mission Control Houston, a team of about 20 flight controllers is watching over the station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year in conjunction with their counterparts in Moscow. Overseeing activities here is International Space Station Flight Director Royce Renfrew. Aboard the station, the crew is in the middle of their day. For Fink and Lonchikov, they're just waking up, and this is their 165th day in space and their 163rd day aboard the space station. It is Okada's 11th day in space and the 9th day aboard the station. In In preparation for this launch, Expedition 18 has been readying the station for its new crew by rehearsing and testing procedures and systems for docking. Station at present is an altitude of 218 miles above the southern tip of South America, known as Tierra del Fuego. We're now T-minus 11 minutes and 34 seconds and counting until the launch of Expedition 19 crew from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. After launch, the next 2 days will be spent watching over the rendezvous of the Soyuz with the station, leading to the docking scheduled to occur at 8:14 a.m. Central Time Saturday. That docking will be followed about 3 hours later by the opening of the hatches into the station, which will mark the start of a 10-day shift change between the two crews. Again, the countdown is proceeding on schedule with launch just 11 minutes from now. The crew has been aboard the Soyuz for about 2 hours conducting final systems checks with Russian launch controllers. The Expedition 19 crew has been aboard the Soyuz for about 2 hours conducting final systems checks with the Russian launch controllers. As they were preparing for their mission, Padalka and Barrett shared insight into their personal histories and motivations for spaceflight.
A taste for adventure is a common trait among the International Space Station's Expedition 19 crew members, but the paths that brought them together for this adventure covered different ground. Gennady Padalka, now a colonel in Russia's Air Force, was born and raised in the southwestern Russian city of Krasnodar on the Kuban River north of the Black Sea. He was only 3 years old when Yuri Gagarin flew in space.
And when I was only 11 years old, I remember watching people walk on the moon, and it was an incredible decade for all mankind. And I think at that time each boy dreamed to become an cosmonaut or astronaut. So did I.
And although that dream dimmed, Padalka's fascination with aviation prompted his choice of career. He graduated from the Higher Military Aviation College in Yeisk as a pilot and an engineer, and spent 10 years flying in the Soviet Air Force.
But then, once I met our famous cosmonaut, Alexei Leonov. He was the first person who participated in the first international project, Apollo-Soyuz, with your astronauts. And he suggested that I try to become a cosmonaut. And I tried, and I got it.
After basic cosmonaut training, and before his first spaceflight, Padalka earned a master's degree as an engineer ecologist from the UNESCO International Center for Instruction Systems. He was commander of the Mir-26 mission from August 1998 to February 1999, and the International Space Station's Expedition 9 in 2004. He's the first person ever assigned a second command of this station, and is eager to contribute to the future of human space exploration.
It seems to me our space research, all our space technology are very useful for the next generations. And because our job in space right now, this is, it's like a bottom line for the next generation.
Padalka's crewmate throughout this flight is Mike Barrett. Barrett was born in Vancouver, Washington, across the Columbia River from Portland, Oregon.
Well, I grew up in Camas, Washington. It's a fairly small town on the Columbia River in the southwest. It's a beautiful part of the country. There's hills, mountains, forests, and it's not that far from the ocean. I grew up on a farm, grew up riding horses and breaking bones and doing all sorts of things that boys did during that time. It was a great place to grow up.
But he didn't grow up imagining he would become an astronaut. He did think about being a paleontologist, and then an astronomer, and later a marine biologist, all thanks to the teachers in a small-town school system.
They were extremely influential, not just because they taught what they taught, but they taught how to do experiments and how to be curious, essentially, and why it's good to be curious.
Next stop was the University of Washington, where he earned a bachelor's degree in zoology. Then Northwestern University for his MD and a residency in internal medicine. Barrett earned a master's while completing a residency in aerospace medicine at Wright State in Dayton, Ohio, and then came to Houston to work in the space program. After a year managing a health maintenance facility for the Space Station Freedom project, Barrett was assigned as a NASA flight surgeon. He worked in the shuttle program, then Shuttle Mir, and then the International Space Station program, where he was lead flight surgeon for the Expedition 1 crew.
The more I worked directly with crews, the more I realized I would so love to experience that myself and to really get a better idea of what it's like. I think I can perhaps do a little bit more good for my field of space medicine by experiencing it myself.
Barrett was selected as an astronaut in 2000, moving to a job that has benefits which he feels outweigh the risks.
We do this because what we can do to help the world's population is worth that risk that we take. And the more experience we gain, the lower we expect that risk to become. We want to see new technologies and spacecraft design and medical support and countermeasures, life support systems that will make that safer and safer as we go along.
Engineers continue to monitor all systems aboard the Soyuz rocket and its Soyuz TMA capsule, and set to begin its voyage in space in just about 5 minutes and 45 seconds. A short while ago, commands were sent to switch power from ground sources to the Soyuz's onboard batteries. On the launch pad at Baikonur, the countdown is proceeding on schedule. 5 minutes, 30 seconds to launch. At this point in the countdown, the Soyuz's first stage steering jets are in the ready-to-launch position, and ground commands have been received from the rocket indicating that all control and auxiliary systems are ready for launch. Launch control is reporting that the range at Baikonur is clear and the Soyuz rocket is ready to begin its journey. We're looking now at live in-cabin views of the trio Space Explorers about to launch into orbit. T-minus 5 minutes and counting. Onboard systems switched to onboard control. Soyuz Commander Gennady Padalka's controls have been activated, and crew members are closing their helmets, which puts them on suit oxygen. Launch key is inserted into the launch bunker and ready for launch. T-minus 4 minutes, 30 seconds to launch.
Кстати, вот на запуск приехало очень большое количество на сей раз специалистов из НАСА. Мне кажется, самое большое. Мы их сейчас встречали с Гретом. Да, он привез очень большую экспозицию на наш музей вот сюда.
T-minus 4 minutes to launch.
Да, вас не понял, это хорошая история, если у нас такая группа поддержки от нас, это очень приятно. Группа очень большая, и они сегодня посмотрели пока вот после посадки полностью музей, домики Королева, Гагарина, посмотрели хранилище, МиГ для ракет-носителей «Союз». Поэтому очень довольны они. Несмотря на жуткий холод по сравнению со вчерашним днем, вчера было 20 градусов тепла, сегодня вы видите от 6 до 10. Поэтому они, значит, вот сейчас наблюдают за стартом, наверное. Антон Николаевич, область там не растаскивает, нет, получше не становится.
T-minus 3 minutes to launch. Nitrogen purge of the engine combustion chambers has been completed.
Ну, чуть-чуть, Геннадий Иванович, вот если присмотреться, стало посветлее. Чуть-чуть. Уже таких черных туч нет. Поэтому я думаю, что видно будет хорошо. В всяком случае, с наблюдателем...
T-minus 2 minutes and 30 seconds. The booster tank is being pressurized for flight.
Самое главное, дождя и снега нет. Ну, это все красиво, вообще хорошо.
It's a cold and rainy day at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. T-minus 2 minutes to launch toward the International Space Station. All systems are still go for the launch. T-minus 1 minute 30 seconds to launch.
Минута 10.
1 minute 10 seconds to lift off. Exactly.
T-minus 1 minute to launch. The Soyuz is now on internal power. Automatic launch sequencer is on. First umbilical tower is separating from the tower. Less than a minute away from launch of the 19th expedition crew and an American spaceflight participant to the International Space Station. T-minus 30 seconds.
We see servicing tower separated. Copy.
The first umbilical tower has separated from the vehicle.
Everything goes well.
T-minus 23 seconds.
So we'll be here on the loop supporting you.
T-minus 15 seconds. Second umbilical tower moving away from the Soyuz.
Ignition.
Ignition, the first stage engines.
Ready. Intermediate ready.
First stage engines are at maximum thrust.
Main ready, liftoff.
Liftoff of the Soyuz spacecraft carrying Gennady Padalka, Mike Barrett, and Charles Simonyi to the International Space Station. Good pitch program according to flight controllers.
Experiencing small vibrations. Yes, we see that.
Getting small vibrations. The Soyuz is heading toward a link up for the International Space Station 2 days from now. Good first stage performance. Soyuz developing 102 pounds of thrust from its fire boosters and single engine. The first stage of the Soyuz measures 68 feet in length.
Everything is nominal. We're feeling well. Copy that.
24 feet in diameter as it burns for the first 2 minutes and 6 seconds of the flight.
Slight G-loads, but nothing out of the ordinary. Just as usual. It allows 2 times. This is your 3rd time on this way.
At 1 minute and 58 seconds, jettison of the 4 strap-on boosters will occur. These will have completed their job and have dropped away at an altitude of 28 statute miles.
Copy. G-loads are increasing. Nothing out of the ordinary. Now we see only a dot in the sky.
And now we have live in-cabin views aboard the Soyuz spacecraft.
Everything is well, we're feeling well. Confirm separation, everything is nominal.
Separation, the Soyuz second stage now performing as advertised.
The weather is wonderful on the ground now, clear sky.
Second stage of the Soyuz is 56 feet in length, 13.5 feet in diameter with a single engine providing 96 tons of thrust for its 3 minutes and 28 seconds of operation.
Bearing jettison confirm. Copy that. Do you experience the jettisoning of the fairing? Yes. Yes, we we see the lights coming through the window. Oh yes, you guys are now receiving sun. Exactly. You may get suntanned while you're flying. Yes, under the windows.
And there's the small gnome hanging from the ceiling of the spacecraft, a memento from Gennady Padalka's first mission to the International Space Station on Expedition 9.
So everything is well, feeling well, vehicle is performing well. Copy all. How is Simony doing? Oh, I'm doing well.
Four minutes into the flight of the Soyuz and all systems performing nominally.
This is your second flight. Which time was easier?
Continuing
The first or the second?
to power up on the second stage. Running for a total of 3 minutes and 28 seconds.
Understand my question. This is your second launch. Which launch was more difficult, more rough? Inaudible. We have felt the separation. Everything is nominal. The TV cameras came on.
4 minutes, 58 seconds into the flight, the core booster burned out and separates at an altitude of 105 miles or 170 kilometers. Third stage ignition is occurring.
On the TV.
The 4 liquid-fueled engines that have completed their task for today are now dropping away. About 4 minutes of powered flights is remaining. The Soyuz is now being propelled by the single engine of the Soyuz's third stage. That engine providing 30 tons of thrust and is going to burn for 4 minutes and 2 seconds. Continuing to receive live television pictures from inside the crew cabin.
Perhaps, Gennady, if we purchase those brand new gadgets, the visibility would be better. Inaudible. Vehicle nominal, we're feeling well, everything goes well. Copy. Vehicle is nominal, feeling well. Everything is nominal. Copy. Copy all. Everything is nominal on the ground as well. 440 seconds. Copy. Altitude 200 kilometers. Copy. Approximate altitude 200 kilometers. All is well on board.
Crew members reporting current altitude is 200 kilometers. That's about 125 statute miles. All systems working well.
Stay in touch on the phone from the orbit. Yes, Anatoly Nikolaevich, I'm not going to pester you with my calls, but if something comes up, I will be calling you. Vehicle is doing well, we're feeling well, G load's increasing, everything is nominal. Yuri Lenchikov called me a lot to report on the situation. Did he interrupt you? No, never, even if when I was driving. I was happy to receive his calls. So anyway, we'll be in touch. Confirm a separation of the third stage, sensor on, gravity and G loads are gone, we're in space. Well guys, good luck to you. Thank you. And we will talk to you soon. Thank you.
And third stage separation confirmed as the Soyuz is now in orbit and the microgravity is being felt by the crew. The single liquid-fueled engine has now shut down and dropped away at an altitude of about 125 statute miles. Third stage now performing an avoidance maneuver by opening an outgassing valve in the liquid oxygen tank.
Confirm completion.
We have that confirmation of the spacecraft separation. The capsule and crew inside now safely in orbit. The spacecraft is going to automatically begin initiating its pre-programmed commanding for antenna and solar arrays to deploy. The Soyuz's third stage steering jets are now firing to separate the booster from the capsule. It's orbiting at an altitude of about 143 miles by 118 miles. That orbit will be raised systematically over the course of the next 2 days to put it in close proximity to the space station for a final rendezvous and docking. That is set for 8:14 a.m. Central Time on Saturday. Control of the spacecraft from here on will be overseen by the Russian Mission Control Center in Kharkiv outside of Moscow.
RP2 closed, leak check. That's at 1500. Copy. Please call down the first measurement.
Today and tomorrow, the engines will be fired 3 additional times to further raise the Soyuz's orbit to that of the station. And then Saturday, the final engine burns will be executed to place the crew and its Soyuz in the proper orbit for final rendezvous and docking. This is a live view from the Russian Mission Control Center in Kharkiv, Russia. Flight controllers continuing to watch the crew and the live downlink television on the screen at the front of the room.
How copy, Soyuz crew? Hear you loud and clear. Yes, at 1500, stop, 787, S 812. 862. Copy all numbers. Thank you. I'm continuing with the leak checks. Yes, please, and please provide the call downs of the data. Will do.
And International Space Station Commander Mike Fink just voiced up congratulations to the crew of the Soyuz spacecraft launching to the International Space Station, telling them that they are looking forward to the arrival of the Expedition 19 crew and a good handover before he and Yuri Lenchikov prepare for their return home to Earth on April the 7th, along with Charles Simonyi, who will be spending a week in space with the 2 crews.
MCC to Altair. Go ahead. GDU и Сиус. Parameters are 16, 17.7, 20.7,
26-17,269. Данные приняты. Спасибо.
20th 9.0, 21st 20.1, 22nd 327, 23rd 315, 24th 17.1, 25 17.6, 26 26.9. Copy all. Altair, how are you feeling? Feeling excellent. Copy. Everybody's excited except especially Michael. Copy. As we're doing leak checks, let's prepare page 59 of the book and verify data. Yes, let us first deactivate the camera.
Готовы. Какая страничка? 59.
Ready to verify which page number? Page number 59.
Открыли? 59.
Do you have the page open? Yes.
Yeah, this is Mission Control Houston. We have now lost our in-cabin views from the Soyuz spacecraft carrying Commander Gennady Padalka and Flight Engineer Michael Barrett, along with spaceflight participant Charles Simonyi from the United States, as they launch to the International Space Station to begin the start of Expedition 19. 2 days from now, a link up in space will take place high above Russia with ground tracking stations. The docking is set for 8:14 a.m. Central Time. It's going to continue the seamless transition of one crew to the next. 12 days from now, handover completed, Expedition 18 minus Koichi Wakata, but with Simonyi will board the Soyuz currently docked to the station and return home after 6 months in space, and leave Expedition 19, including Wakata, to oversee the ongoing research and operation of the space station. During its 2-month increment, Expedition 19 will prepare the International Space Station for its first ever 6-person resident crew. Padalka, Barrett, and Wakata will become Expedition 20 crew members upon the arrival of flight engineers Roman Marmonenko, Bob Thirsk, and Frank DeWinna in their Soyuz space vehicle in late May. Padalka and Barrett in their 6-month stay as both Expedition 19 and 20 crew members will see the arrival of 2 Soyuz crews, 2 Russian Progress resupply vehicles, 2 space shuttles, and the first Japanese H-2 transfer vehicle, or HTV. The STS-127 2JA mission, scheduled for mid-June, will bring, along with Tim Kopra, Wakata's replacement, the final elements of the Japanese logistics module known as Kibo, or HOPE. Later this year, Padalka and Barrett will conduct a pair of spacewalks in Russian Orlan suits, install a navigation antenna on Zvezda for the docking of the Mini Research Module 2 later this year, install scientific equipment on the hull of Zvezda and remove a Russian science experiment, BioRisk. One of those spacewalks will be an intravehicular spacewalk, and we'll have 2 crew members depressurizing the small docking module that connects Zvezda to the Russian Zarya module and swap 2 hatches from its interior and in the attachment of the MRM-2. Padalka and Barrett also will see another partial crew rotation with NASA astronaut Nicole Stott replacing Tim Kopra in the late summer. Stott will launch on the STS-128 mission that will deliver critical supplies and an ammonia tank assembly to the International Space Station. The next crew, Expedition 20, launches to the station in late May. Padalka and Barrett are scheduled to return home in their Soyuz in mid-October. Again, all this bringing the space station up to full partners as we flesh out the entire crew complement with all of the major partners in the International Space Station represented together on orbit. This will conclude our live coverage of the launch of the Expedition 19 crew and spaceflight participant Charles Simonyi. Video replays of the launch will be coming up next on NASA TV. Launch day highlights will air on a video file no later than 9 a.m. Central Time today. And then docking coverage on NASA TV will begin on Saturday at 7:45 a.m. Central Time from Mission Control in Korolev, just outside of Moscow. Until then, we'll be returning to our continuing coverage of the STS-119 mission of the Space Shuttle Discovery, which is looking forward to a landing on Saturday. This is Mission Control Houston.
88,7, наклонение 51,65, высота 199 на 258. Принято.
Reading orbital parameters.
halfway is the Soyuz rocket. The final preparations are underway and cosmonauts are already inside the spacecraft. When it takes off, the noise and vibration will be felt as far as this place. At viewing stands, friends and relatives are anxiously waiting for the launch.
Really excited. A little bit nervous, of course. Very emotional, so I'm probably going to start crying afterwards.
And the moment has arrived. As the last space tourist disappears in the sky, many on the ground are left wondering when will they be able to make such journeys. Rehan Dimitri, BBC News, Baikonur Cosmodrome, Kasachstan.
Die Raumfähre Discovery ist auf dem Weg zurück zur Erde. In der Nacht dockte das Shuttle mit den 7 Astronauten nach 13 Tagen Besuch von der ISS ab. Die Langzeitbesatzung dort bleibt aber nicht lange allein. Kurz vor 1 Uhr heute Mittag startete eine neue Crew von Kasachstan aus mit dem Soyuz-Raumschiff Richtung Raumstation. Mit an Bord ist auch der US-Millionär Charles Simonyi. Er ist der erste Weltraumtourist, der die Station zum 2. Mal besucht.
Thank you, Kyle, and good day from the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside Moscow, where synchronicity in space is the watchword for the day. As you're looking at a picture of the Russian Mission Control Center from a camera in the balcony and their ISS flight control room, the Soyuz TMA-14 spacecraft now just 560 meters away from a docking to the International Space Station to bring 2 new residents to the complex and a U.S. businessman for a 10-day handover under a commercial agreement with the Russian Federal Space Agency. A good view now through the Soyuz cameras routed through the U.S. Ku-band communication system as you see the newly complete set of 2 sets of solar arrays on the International Space Station, complements of the Discovery crew that's preparing to land today at the Kennedy Space Center. Everything has gone very well in the 2 days since the Soyuz TMA-14 lifted off from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan with 50-year-old Gennady Padalka, 50-year-old Mike Barrett, and 60-year-old U.S. spaceflight participant Charles Simonyi on board. They have had a flawless automated rendezvous sequence for the trip to the International Space Station. Now external cameras on the truss of the orbital outpost now capturing the Soyuz TMA-14 as it begins its fly around of the International Space Station to align itself to the aft docking port of the Zvezda service module. The docking of the Soyuz to Zvezda is scheduled at around 8:14 a.m. Central Time, which will be 4:14 p.m. Moscow time, with the operation being controlled from Russian flight controllers here at the Russian Mission Control Center. In the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, down the hall from the Space Shuttle Flight Control Room that Kyle was describing entry and landing preparations from, Brian Smith, the International Space Station Flight Director, and spacecraft communicator Aki Hoshide from the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency will be prepared to talk to the crew when required during the course of the final phase of this rendezvous for a link-up to the Zvezda service module. The space station crew on board the International Space Station Expedition 18 Commander Mike Fink, Flight Engineer and Soyuz Commander Yuri Lanchikov, and Koichi Wakata, the newly delivered flight engineer that has joined Fink and Lanchikov and soon will transition to the Expedition 19 crew, were awakened at about 4:30 a.m. Central Time today to prepare for the arrival of the new residents and Simonyi. It will be a very busy day on orbit, a day that will culminate with a couple of orbits worth of leak checks once the docking is confirmed and hooks and latches are engaged to form a hard mate between the 2 vehicles.
We see the picture very well.
You can see a good view of the Soyuz TMA-14 now aligning itself to the aft docking port of the Zvezda service module. This fly around should be complete about 5 minutes from now to begin a period of about 12 minutes of station keeping, allowing Russian flight controllers to gain a precise alignment of the forward docking probe on the Soyuz with the Zvezda docking port before the automated commands are initiated to resume the final approach for docking, with again docking scheduled at 8:14 a.m. Central Time, 4:14 p.m. Moscow time. The docking, once completed, will then begin the series of the initiation of the hard mate between the two vehicles, allowing a period of a few minutes to allow the relative motion between the Soyuz and the International Space Station to dampen out. Once the docking probe is retracted and the hooks and latches are engaged, there will be the leak checks that we mentioned a moment ago on both sides of the docking interface. From the Soyuz side by Commander Gennady Padalka, soon to assume command of the International Space Station from Mike Fink. That formal change of command is scheduled for next Thursday, April 2nd. That will mark the formal handover of the control of the International Space Station to Padalka and Barrett, who will be joining Koichi Wakata as the newly comprised Expedition 19 crew. They actually will have a small increment that will bridge the gap between Expedition 18 and the launch of Roman Romanenko, Canadian Space Agency astronaut Bob Thirsk, and European Space Agency astronaut Frank DeWitte on the next Soyuz spacecraft from the Baikonur Cosmodrome on May 27th, with a docking schedule on May 29th to inaugurate the era of six-person crew on the International Space Station. About 200 meters now separating the Soyuz from its docking port at the aft end of the Zvezda service module, closing at a rate now of about 0.6 of a meter per second. At the time of contact and capture, the Soyuz's approach will slow to a rate of just about 1/10 of a meter per second. Later in the day, after the hatches are opened to allow the two crews to greet one another, there will be a safety briefing that will be provided by Mike Fink for all 6 crew members on board and the newly arrived Expedition 19 crew. That will be followed by the transfer of equipment from the Soyuz vehicle to the International Space Station, the deactivation of Soyuz systems early this afternoon, and the transfer of Charles Simone's personalized Soyuz seedliner from the Soyuz TMA-14 that he is currently flying on to the Soyuz TMA-13 that is docked to the earthward or nadir port of the Zarya module of the International Space Station. That will be Simone's ride home along with Mike Fink and Yuri Lanchikov on April 7th for a landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan, wrapping up for what Fink and Lanchikov will be a half year in space, and for Simone, his second flight in 2 years to the International Space Station, this time a 12-day venture and 10 dock days on the International Space Station. You can see the movement of the Core's automated rendezvous antenna on the forward end of the Soyuz TMA-14. That Core's antenna sends out basically a radio beacon to a comparable system on the Zvezda service module to provide a reflective navigational set of data that is loaded into the Soyuz computers to allow the Soyuz to determine its range from its docking port at the aft end of Zvezda and its rate of closure. Now just 200 meters separating the two vehicles. In the International Space Station Flight Control Room, visiting vehicle officer Richard Parker updating Flight Director Brian Smith on the fly-around that is currently in progress as the Soyuz vehicle carrying Gennady Padalka, the Expedition 19 and then 20 commander in the center seat, NASA astronaut, former flight surgeon Mike Barrett in the left seat, Charles Simone on the right seat, as we enter the final phase of the rendezvous, with station keeping scheduled to begin just a short time from now. Soyuz vehicle now inside 200 meters. All of this activity taking place as the deorbit preparations are beginning for Discovery's crew for a landing at the Kennedy Space Center this afternoon. These dual operations are carefully choreographed to enable the Soyuz to dock following the departure of Discovery back on March 25th after it spent 8 days docked to the International Space Station.
Okay, we copy.
Примерно 16-19 должен быть.
You will enter the shadow at 1619 something.
Thrusters on the Soyuz TMA-14 firing in an automated sequence to guide it in the final moments of its fly-around for a precise alignment with the Zvezda service module. It should be precisely aligned for station keeping at a distance of about 150 meters. Here at the Russian Mission Control Center, a NASA delegation on hand led by Michael Hawes, the acting associate administrator for NASA, also joined by Kirk Shireman, the International Space Station deputy program manager, Mike Barrett's family here in force, along with other officials. Shortly after docking, there will be a post-docking news conference, and then 2 orbits worth of leak checks prior to the scheduled hatch opening, which is planned for 7:10 p.m. Moscow time, 11:10 a.m. Central Time. We are told that hatch opening could occur slightly earlier than planned if all the preparations are complete to enable the 2 crews to greet one another slightly ahead of schedule.
Moscow, yes, go ahead. You can switch into the wide loop. Okay, copy.
Прошел СФК ТПО плюс Y, как приняли? Авария сближения приняли?
Okay, we see you. We're starting the approach. Copy? Yes, copy.
Рокар.
On the Rokar.
Переходите на ручную. Ручную переходи.
Switch, Gennady, switch into the manual mode.
Света у нас много.
We have plenty of light, so you're okay. Yes, we switch into the manual mode. +1, confirm.
Да, подтвердили.
We confirm, yes.
Russian flight controllers here at the Russian Mission Control Center have instructed Gennady Padalka to override the Corps' automated docking system and take over manual control of the flying of the Soyuz TMA-14 for the final 150 meters of his approach for docking.
Started approach. Copy.
Padalka, soon to become the first 2-time commander of the International Space Station, now flying manual approach of the Soyuz TMA-14.
Copy. Copy.
Станция в центре, все нормально.
Station is in the middle. Everything's nominal. Now start approach.
Картинка нормальная, Ген?
Gena, the picture is okay? Yeah, the picture is excellent. Excellent, right in the middle. No problems whatsoever.
Thanks.
Good, thank you.
Узел наблюдаем. Крен у нас практически выбран.
I see the docking.
Хоть день, напомните,
I see the docking port.
Слышите?
MCC Moscow, do you hear me?
No reason given at this time for the switch to the manual approach. Gennady Padalka in the center seat of the Soyuz TMA-14 in control, as the Soyuz is just 200 meters away from its docking port at the aft end of the Zvezda service module. Everything else on the Soyuz TMA-14 operating in good shape, with docking scheduled about 16 minutes from now.
Altair Mission Control Moscow. Depot B1 should be selected. Depot B1 selected. G5. G5, Michael. G5. Yes. Depot B1 command is selected. G5. Copy. Copy Depot B1. Have approach. We are watching the target, not very well yet. The docking compartment is in view. Breaking some.
A good view of the Soyuz TMA-14 behind the folded solar arrays that used to provide electricity for the Zarya module of the International Space Station, no longer needed. Those arrays are folded up in accordion-like style. You can see the crosshairs in this television camera view from the TMA-14 with Gennady Padalka in manual control of the flying for the final phase of the docking. The Soyuz just about 76 meters away now, cruising at a rate of about 1/10 of a meter per second.
Let me check. Just a second. Let me break some more. Yes, I think we are. Yes, it's working. You can check the right column of course on the format. Come on again. Course display for range and rate is accurate. Yes, we do have braking, we do have retrograde. We had that question. Copy. Okay, it's good to check. Always. Makes sense. I understand. I see crosshairs and the table. Check also thruster saturation on Y. Yes, I do have it. Left and right. I do have it all on all channels. Okay, Gennady, we'll figure it out later. Go ahead and dock now. I understand.
Russian flight controllers here in Kolyov telling Gennady Padalka, the Soyuz commander, to go ahead and dock. Everything looking good as Padalka has aligned the forward docking probe of the Soyuz under his manual control with the aft docking port of the Zvezda service module.
Station, what is the attitude mode right now for the station? Igor Ivanovich. Igor Ivanovich. Is it OSK? I'll check. Okay, I'm still braking.
Visiting Vehicle Officer Richard Parker informing ISS Flight Director Brian Smith in the Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center that the core's antenna on the Soyuz TMA-14 has retracted as planned. The Soyuz about 75 meters away from docking, closing at a rate of about 0.4 of a meter per second.
And the rate is a safe rate assessed. What is the assessment of range? About 20 meters at this time, 3 squares. Keep braking some more. Copy. It's just like on a simulator.
The Soyuz TMA-14 perfectly aligned. You're looking right down the barrel of the aft docking port of the Zvezda service module.
Copy.
This Soyuz vehicle will be relocated in July from this docking port to the Zarya module's nadir or earthward-facing docking port, freeing up the aft port of Zvezda once again for oncoming Progress resupply vehicles. We've now moved within range of Russian ground stations. All that telemetry is being received by the Russian flight control team here in Korolyov, and everything is looking good. Gennady Padalka easing in the Soyuz TMA-14 for its expected docking a short time from now.
What's the range? We're going to have contact now. We have contact. We have capture. We have capture. Congratulations. Thank you. Congratulations. Everything is showing here as well. Perfect. I was worried I didn't want to go back. So we continue. Yes, please continue. Mike, Gennady.
This is Mission Control in Korolyov. Docking confirmed just as we were moving into range of Russian ground stations. Docking confirmed at 8:05 a.m. Central Time, 4:05 p.m. Moscow time, as the two spacecraft passed over central Kazakhstan, just south of the capital city of Astana. Again, the docking confirmed at 8:05 a.m. Central Time, 4:05 p.m. Moscow time. New residents have arrived at the International Space Station. A manual docking by Gennady Padalka that occurred about 9 minutes ahead of schedule. And the visiting vehicle officer in Mission Control in Houston reporting to Flight Director Brian Smith that the docking probe has begun to retract to initiate the process of hooks and latches engaging to form a hard mate between the two vehicles.
Okay, we're switching to page 85 and performing measurements. All right. Pressure. We have measurements 1606, 710 and Bill and 749 in the orbital. We couldn't read you. We copy. Did you get information on pressure? Yes, and record it, and then you will be comparing the delta.
Tag ist die neue Langzeitbesatzung auf der Internationalen Raumstation angekommen. Die Sojus-Kapsel war vor dem Andocken 2 Tage im All unterwegs. Zum zweiten Mal mit an Bord ist der Weltraumtourist Charles Simonyi aus den USA, der Anfang April zurückkehrt. Der Kosmonaut Gennady Padalka und der US-Astronaut Michael Barrett bleiben bis Oktober.
Out of this world, outer space. It's mission complete for NASA's Space Shuttle Discovery. It landed safely at the Kennedy Space Center just a short time ago in Florida, despite cloudy skies. We watched it, in fact, live on air. The landing was delayed 90 minutes and an extra orbit due to high winds. The 13-day mission included the installation of the last pair of solar wings at the International Space Station. Discovery's 7 crew members brought back lots of science samples, and we're talking about a particular sample that we're very interested in, the crew members' own urine and saliva that have been recycled into water, drinkable water, supposedly. The goal is to see if it is safe to drink. NASA's next shuttle mission is scheduled for May. Well, a bit of excitement for a billionaire space tourist on the Russian space capsule Soyuz. The cosmonaut in control docked the spaceship with the International Space Station manually after an engine sensor apparently malfunctioned. The docking went smoothly, though, and applause broke out at mission control when the hookup was announced successful. Well, they've already put a man on the moon. Why not a garden on the moon? An American company hopes to grow a seed into a plant on the moon's surface. Paragon Space Development plans to incubate a mustard seed in a mini greenhouse like this. It would protect the plant from the sun's rays and also temperatures that reach 107 degrees Celsius. It's not clear when the experiment would be sent to Earth's closest neighbor, though. It'll be interesting to see.
Discovery has returned to Earth after its 13-day mission to the International Space Station. It landed safely at its home base in Florida a bit later than planned because of concerns about the weather. The shuttle brought solar wings to the space station, which will provide extra power. The ISS can now support a larger crew to conduct more research. Successfully docked with the International Space Station on Saturday. Its crew includes US billionaire Charles Simonyi, who will be the last paying tourist to head into orbit for the next few years.
Russia has strongly protested against this weapon system, claiming it was directed against it. This past week, Polish Foreign Minister Radek Sikorski admitted as much. He said, "We signed with the old administration. We patiently wait for the new administration, and we hope we don't regret our trust in the United States." He went on to say, "I'm afraid Russian generals and even the Russian president continue to threaten us with the deployment of medium-range missiles." Mr. Sikorski, it would appear, forgot to stick to the script. He made no mention of North Korea or Iran, only Russia. The essence of Washington's anti-missile defense was truly shown for what it has always been, to fatally compromise Russia's ability to defend itself. Reading between the lines, we could also see Sikorski's disappointment with the choice of the American people. Under a McCain administration, it was rumored he would be tapped to be the next head of NATO. What I find interesting about this is not the fact that Washington's anti-missile plans are indeed directed against Russia. This has been obvious from the get-go. What strikes me as tragic, but sadly inevitable, is how so-called allies turn to political blackmail. Sikorski doesn't want to regret his trust in the Americans. Well, get in line, Radek. This happens all the time.
Vorbild und wahrscheinlich auch deshalb sieht die Welt Russlands Präsident Medvedev jetzt als tollkühnen Kampfpiloten. Genau wie vor ihm Wladimir Putin. In einer Militärbasis nahe Moskau nahm Medvedev Platz in einem Kampfbomber und drehte als Co-Pilot wohlgemerkt eine Runde. Eine halbe Stunde kehrte ein begeisterter Präsident zurück und versprach, viele der veralteten Flugzeuge der russischen Luftwaffe durch neue auszutauschen. In Florida auf Erdboden gelandet. Da klopfen auch schon die nächsten Gäste an. Mittendrin in der Soyuz-Mannschaft ein echter Tourist, aber kein Frischling. Charles Simonyi hat schon zum 2. Mal auf der ISS gebucht. Diesmal löhnte der Software-Milliardär $35 Millionen mit Vollpension. Mick Locher.
Beim Andocken an die ISS bewies der russische Kommandant Gennady Padalka eiserne Nerven. Weil ein Sensor den Ausfall eines Triebwerks meldete, musste der Autopilot abgeschaltet werden. Padalka dockte von Hand an. Später stellte sich heraus, es war ein Fehlalarm. Mit der Soyuz-Kapsel kam Fluggast Charles Simonyi an Bord, ein aus Ungarn stammender Milliardär, der als Softwareentwickler bei Microsoft ein reicher Mann wurde. Es ist bereits sein zweiter Ausflug ins All. Die Reise war ihm $35 Millionen wert. Er wird für absehbare Zeit der letzte Weltraumtourist sein. Denn bald soll die ISS-Dauerbesatzung auf 6 Mitglieder anwachsen. Dann ist für private Besucher kein Platz mehr. Die Soyuz-Besatzungsmitglieder Padalka und US-Astronaut Michael Barrett werden nun 4 Monate auf der ISS verbringen. Die bisherigen Statthalter kehren mit dem Weltraumgast am 7. April zur Erde zurück. Die US-Raumfähre Discovery war am Samstagabend sicher in Florida gelandet. Ihre Besatzung hatte zuvor die Energieversorgung der ISS mit 2 neuen Solarsegeln auf maximale Leistung gebracht.
Ende einer etwas anderen Dienstreise. Um 20:13 Uhr unserer Zeit setzt die Discovery auf dem US-Weltraumbahnhof in Florida auf. 1,5 Stunden später zwar als eigentlich geplant, das Wetter hatte nicht mitgespielt, aber am Ende ist es eine perfekte Landung. Die Mission der 7-köpfigen Besatzung dagegen verlief nicht immer ganz reibungslos. Bei den Außenarbeiten an der internationalen Raumstation ISS gab es immer wieder Schwierigkeiten. Ein kleineres Problem musste auch die Mannschaft des russischen Sojus-Raumschiffes bewältigen, das inzwischen an der ISS angekommen ist. Beim Andocken versagte vermutlich ein Sensor, sodass der Kosmonaut Padalka das Manöver per Handsteuerung zu Ende bringen musste. Herzlich dann die Begrüßung, die alte trifft die neue Langzeitbesatzung und den Weltraumtouristen Charles Simonyi. Wir hatten einen erstklassigen Flug. Das Andocken war ein bisschen aufregend, aber wir sind froh, hier zu sein. Und die Station sieht großartig aus, sagt US-Astronaut Michael Barrett. Und Simonyi, der 2007 schon einmal als Privatmann im All war, meint, hier hat sich einiges getan seit dem letzten Mal. Es hat eine beeindruckende Größe. Simonyi, der sich den Ausflug ins All rund 35 Millionen US-Dollar hat kosten lassen, dürfte bis auf Weiteres der letzte private Gast sein. In Zukunft soll die Langzeitbesatzung der ISS von 3 auf 6 aufgestockt werden. Dann ist in den Sojus-Kapseln kein Platz mehr. Gut eine Woche kann Simonyi das Abenteuer Weltraum noch genießen. Dann kehrt er mit der bisherigen ISS-Mannschaft zur Erde zurück. Der Russe Padalka, der Amerikaner Barrett und der Japaner Wakata bleiben bis Oktober in der Schwerelosigkeit.
Im Observatorium der Uni Bern in Zimmerwald beobachtet Thomas Schildknecht seit Jahren die Entwicklung im All. Wird es demnächst Schrott regnen?
Nein, absolut nicht. Die meisten Schrottteile...
Absolut nicht. Die meisten Schrottteile bleiben ewig dort oben. Nur ganz selten kommt ein Schrottteil der Erde so nahe, dass es vom Luftwiderstand abstürzt, und dann verglühen sie in den allermeisten Fällen. Man kann sich vorstellen, ich schwinge einen Stein an einer Schnur. In der Mitte ist die Erde und die Schnur ist die Erdanziehungskraft. Die ist im Gleichgewicht mit der Fliehkraft und so dreht der Satellit ewig, wenn er nicht durch irgendetwas gebremst wird.
Der Schrott im All vermehrt sich nicht nur durch einige seltene Crashs und auch nicht nur wegen ein paar verlorener Werkzeuge. Tatsächlich schießen auch Zehntausende von Folienstücken durchs All und beschädigen Satelliten und Raumstationen. Die Geschwindigkeit des Schrotts beträgt mehrere tausend Stundenkilometer und wirkt wie ein Geschoss. Die großen Raumfahrtbehörden haben die Reduktion des Schrotts inzwischen zur prioritären Aufgabe erklärt. In ihrem Auftrag sucht die Beobachtungsstation der Uni Bern in Zimmerwald mit dem Spiegelteleskop den Himmel ab und hat dabei ihre spektakuläre Entdeckung gemacht.
Wir haben viele Teile entdeckt.
Wir haben dort oben viele Teile entdeckt, die sich merkwürdig verhalten. Die Bahnen haben sich auf eine Art geändert, wie wir sie vorher noch nie sahen. Bis wir eine Erklärung hatten, dauerte es sehr lange. Die einzige Erklärung, dass sich die Bahnen so ändern, ist, dass es ganz leichte und dünne Teile sind, zum Beispiel Folien.
Forschungsleiter Schildknecht hat berechnet, dass rund 20% des größeren Schrotts im All reine Goldfolie ist. Dieses Teleskopbild zeigt einen auffallend hellen Fleck. Das könnte Folie sein. Diese Aufnahme zeigt ein Stück Metall, auch ein heller Fleck. Doch für Schildknecht liegen dazwischen Welten.
Also typisch sind jetzt bei den Folien.
Typisch bei den Folien ist, dass sich die Helligkeit stark ändert. Mal mehr und mal weniger. Bei normalen Schrott hingegen bleibt die Helligkeit mehr oder weniger gleich. Folien glitzern. Wenn wir sie ein wenig bewegen, werden sie mal heller, mal dunkler. Das ist der Grund, warum wir denken, dass das hier ein Folienteil ist.
Aus einem Stück Folie wird durch die Distanz von Tausenden von Kilometern ein winziges, weißes Etwas. Heute Nacht will Schildknecht im All eine neue Folie finden, damit er an der internationalen Konferenz der Satellitenbetreiber in Darmstadt seine Erkenntnisse öffentlich machen kann. Stellt das Teleskop auf 260 Grad Azimut ein. Das ist der Winkel zum Horizont. Jetzt die Höhe, genau 40 Grad.
Das ist ein Ausschnitt, wo wir denken,
Bei diesem Ausschnitt vermuten wir besonders viele Schrottteile, weil es da viele Kommunikationssatelliten und Meteosatelliten gibt. Wo viele Satelliten sind, ist höchstwahrscheinlich der meiste Schrott.
Das Teleskop deckt das All über der nördlichen Erdhalbkugel ab. Es erreicht Himmelskörper, die 40.000 Kilometer entfernt sind. Die Lichtempfindlichkeit ist 1 Million Mal stärker als jene des menschlichen Auges. Nach einigen Sekunden Belichtung schickt das Teleskop die Daten zum Rechner. Die neue Aufnahme sucht Schildknecht nach unbekannten Trümmerteilen ab. Mit einer selbstentwickelten Software, die wie eine Maske funktioniert, entfernt er erstmal alle Sterne, dann alle Satelliten und jetzt noch alle Trümmerteile, die bereits in internationalen Registern verzeichnet sind. Was übrig bleibt, sind unbekannte Objekte oder kosmische Strahlen. Wie hier. Die Umrandung ist viel zu scharf. Bei diesem Objekt sind die Ränder unscharf. Das könnte ein Stück Folie sein.
Das ist gut möglich.
Gut möglich. Auf dieser Aufnahme sieht man ein Pünktchen. Um sicher zu sein, ob das Folie ist oder sonst ein Schrottteilchen, müssen wir heute Nacht oder morgen noch mehrere Aufnahmen machen und die Bahn betrachten.
Heute Nacht noch ein paar Aufnahmen, vielleicht auch noch morgen.
Bahnen berechnen, weitere Aufnahmen machen, aus verschiedensten Winkeln. Schildknecht wird dafür mehrere Stunden brauchen. Und das alles für einen kleinen, weißen Fleck. Aber das macht nichts. Die Nacht ist ja noch lang.
Hier ist das erste deutsche Fernsehen mit der Tagesschau.
Guten Abend, meine Damen und Herren. Die NATO hat mit einer wichtigen Personalentscheidung Weichen für die Zukunft gestellt. Auf dem Gipfel in Straßburg kürten die Staats- und Regierungschefs den dänischen Ministerpräsidenten Rasmussen zum neuen Generalsekretär, allerdings erst nach zähem Ringen, denn die Türkei war lange nicht bereit, Rasmussen als Nachfolger des scheidenden Generalsekretärs de Hoop-Scheffer zu akzeptieren. Begleitet wurde der Gipfel zum 60-jährigen Bestehen der NATO auch am Schlusstag wieder von Protesten, die zeitweise eskalierten.
Keine Feier ohne die Eliteflieger von der französischen Flugpatrouille. Der stolze Besitzer, Frankreichs Präsident Sarkozy, genoss seine Sonderrolle als Gastgeber. Alleine schritt er den 27 NATO-Staats- und Regierungschefs entgegen. Die Fußgängerbrücke zwischen Kehl und Straßburg hatten Kanzlerin Merkel und der französische Staatspräsident ausgewählt als symbolischen Ort für das Zusammenwachsen Europas. Eine kurze militärische Zeremonie zu Ehren der NATO-Soldaten und eine Art Ständchen zum 60. Geburtstag. So groß war die NATO noch nie. Ab jetzt vereint sie mit den Neumitgliedern Kroatien und Albanien insgesamt 28 Staaten. Bei der eigentlichen Arbeitssitzung schlug der amerikanische Präsident Obama ernste Töne an. In Afghanistan droht der NATO eine Niederlage, daher warb er eindringlich für mehr Engagement der Europäer. Seit Jahren fehlen in Afghanistan die richtigen Ressourcen. Deswegen wollen wir jetzt mehr machen, um Al-Qaida zu bekämpfen. Und diese Anstrengungen können wir, die Amerikaner, nicht alleine schultern. Die eigentliche Nuss, die die Runde heute zu knacken hatte, war die Wahl eines neuen NATO-Generalsekretärs. Buchstäblich im letzten Moment einigten sich die NATO-Staaten auf Dänemarks Premierminister Rasmussen, den der NATO-Partner Türkei bis zuletzt abgelehnt hatte.
Und dass es uns heute gelungen ist, bei allen Widersprüchen, bei allem, was zu tun ist, einen neuen Generalsekretär zu benennen, das ist die wichtige Voraussetzung dafür, dass die NATO als handlungsfähig anerkannt wird.
Scheinbar hat Barack Obama den türkischen Präsidenten Gül umstimmen können. Der stand unter starkem Druck der islamischen Welt, die Rasmussen einen unsensiblen Umgang mit den umstrittenen Mohammed-Karikaturen vorwirft. Der zukünftige Generalsekretär Rasmussen hat uns zugesagt, dass er in sehr engem Kontakt mit der islamischen Welt arbeiten wird. Der politische Preis aber dürfte höher sein. Die Türkei kann wohl damit rechnen, einen stellvertretenden Generalsekretärsposten in Brüssel zu bekommen. Es war der neue US-Präsident Obama, der diesem Jubiläumsgipfel Glanz und Hoffnung verliehen hat. Denn der innere Zustand der NATO ist alles andere als rosig. Alte und neue Mitglieder streiten um das richtige Verhältnis zu Russland und trotz ihrer Größe hat die NATO Schwächen. Der Konsens schwindet und es fehlt an einem klaren Zukunftskonzept.
Tausende Polizisten waren beiderseits des Rheins zum Schutz des NATO-Gipfels aufgeboten. Vor allem auf der französischen Seite in und um Straßburg kam es dennoch zu heftigen Krawallen. Militante NATO-Gegner randalierten und steckten Gebäude in Brand.
Einer Gruppe von mehreren hundert Demonstranten gelang trotz hermetischer Abriegelung heute Morgen der Einzug in die Straßburger Innenstadt. Ihr Protest gegen den NATO-Gipfel war friedlich, die Polizei behielt die Nerven. Zu diesem Zeitpunkt schien eine Konfrontation noch vermeidbar. Die jungen Demonstranten zufrieden, dass sie ihren Protest sichtbar machen konnten.
Ich bin da, weil ich gegen die NATO protestieren will, weil ich denke, dass das ein Militärbündnis ist, was aufgelöst werden muss, weil es aus dem Kalten Krieg ist.
Doch einige hundert Mitglieder des sogenannten Schwarzen Blocks brachten die Demonstrationen am Nachmittag zur Eskalation. Zuerst schlugen sie Scheiben ein, dann setzten sie eine alte Zollstation und ein Hotel in Brand. Über Straßburg stiegen schwarze Rauchwolken auf, die Anwohner entsetzt.
Das verstehe ich nicht, dass das in Frankreich passiert. In Kehl, in Baden-Baden war nicht so. Aber warum in Frankreich?
Wir haben darauf gewartet, dass was passiert, aber trotzdem nicht so krass.
Die Ausschreitungen betrafen auch die Brücke zwischen Straßburg und Kehl. Auch von deutscher Seite kam Polizeiverstärkung. Die Sicherheitskräfte gingen massiv gegen die Randalierer und gegen andere Demonstranten vor. Es gab nach Behördenangaben mindestens 10 Verletzte. Die Sachschäden waren erheblich. Auch einer der größten Polizeieinsätze der französischen Geschichte konnte diese Verwüstungen nicht verhindern. Am Abend war die Lage wieder unter Kontrolle, wenn auch an einigen Stellen der Stadt noch angespannt. Die Bilder der Brandwolken über Straßburg wurden zum düsteren Kontrast zu der Friedensbotschaft, die der NATO-Gipfel mit seiner symbolischen Brückenüberquerung senden wollte. Verhältnismäßig wenig Randalierern ist es gelungen, auf die Jubiläumsfeier des Bündnisses einen Schatten zu legen.
North Korea says preparations are complete and that the rocket will be fired soon. Neighbouring states suspect that the rocket launch is a cover for a long-range missile test. Greg Morsbach reports.
South Korean Navy vessels are making their presence known in the waters off North Korea. There is mounting tension in the region over the anticipated launch of a powerful new North Korean rocket. Pyongyang describes it as a communication satellite test. But in Japan, Patriot missiles have been placed on alert to shoot down any debris from the North Korean missile. The Japanese are monitoring the situation closely and with great concern.
We're hoping, even at the last minute, that North Korea refrains from launching a missile. However, it is important for us to be fully prepared in case they do.
This is what the regional powers fear might be behind the North Korean missile test. The prospect of Pyongyang developing long-range ballistic missiles for military, not for peaceful purposes. Their southern neighbour is on edge. Hundreds of protesters gathered in Seoul to vent their anger at what they see as an act of aggression.
We and our citizens, the United Nations, the international community, including the United States, Japan, China and Russia, insist there should be punishment for this.
Ideal weather conditions for the missile launch have passed with high winds forecast. But throughout the region and especially in South Korea, there is still a sense of nervousness. Greg Morsbach, BBC News.
Well, as we've been hearing, President Obama has arrived in the Czech Republic. While there, he'll discuss the fate of plans to build a radar station there, part of a US missile defense system proposed by his predecessor, George Bush. It's not clear whether the new US administration will continue with the project. And as Neil Bowdler reports, there's also opposition inside the country.
The Americans have had their eye on this sleepy corner of the Czech Republic. It's slated to be the site of a radar station, which would form a key part of a planned US missile defense system. President George Bush said it was needed to keep America safe from rogue states such as Iran and North Korea. But now there's a new man in the White House, and the locals, many of them long opposed to the scheme, are hoping for a reprieve.
Such radars are okay in Alaska or Greenland,
But it is absolutely ridiculous to build such a system 1.5 kilometers from Czech villages and towns.
That's not a view echoed by the country's outgoing Prime Minister. Mirek Topolánek will be pressing President Obama to stick by the plans during the presidential visit. He's worried the defence shield may be ditched to placate Russia, and he's not the only one.
From the beginning, this has been a bargaining chip for the United States, that in the end this issue will be decided over the heads of the Czech Republic or Czechs. And they will, of course, be willing, or Americans will be willing to trade it for any kind of support from Russia for their efforts in Afghanistan or fighting terrorism and so on.
Czech opinion remains sharply divided over the radar station. Just a few weeks ago, the government had to withdraw a ratification bill from Parliament after it became clear the opposition would throw it out. These young activists, preparing for a march through Prague this weekend, are hoping that if their government doesn't ditch the shield, the US president will. Neil Bowdler, BBC News.
Well, G is the letter of the day today. I'm Rosemary Church with our briefest of alphabet lessons. Jonathan Mann is off. Well, the G20 summit was the big story of the week. Politics, money and a diplomatic minefield. 20 world leaders with one great big mess on their hands.
The United States certainly has some accounting to do.
This week, US President Barack Obama shouldered some of the blame during his first test on the world stage. He and British Prime Minister Gordon Brown were the target of finger-pointing by some members, including Germany and France. French President Nicolas Sarkozy threatened to walk out before talks even began, but was in agreement by the end.
This is the day that the world came together to fight back against the global recession.
World leaders agreed on new money for world trade and the IMF, $1 trillion, and tighter regulation of hedge funds, tax havens, credit rating agencies and the banking system. New transparency rules pushed aggressively by Germany and France. President Obama stayed busy outside the G20 sessions as well.
I had the opportunity to hold bilateral meetings with leaders of Russia, China, South Korea, Saudi Arabia and India, as well as Great Britain.
And when he returns home from other stops in Europe and Turkey, he'll really have to shift gears. Obama took the wheel in Detroit on Monday, forcing out the CEO of General Motors and putting both GM and Chrysler on notice.
I'm announcing that my administration will offer GM and Chrysler a limited additional period of time to work with creditors, unions, and other stakeholders to fundamentally restructure in a way that would justify an investment of additional taxpayer dollars.
And the president will pick up where he left off on the budget brouhaha. Republicans in the US House unveiled their own budget proposal during the president's trip, calling for a suspension of the economic stimulus program. Here we go again. In geopolitics, he hasn't even returned home from his first overseas trip, but Obama is already planning his second.
I have agreed to visit Moscow in July.
And his third.
President Obama even accepting an invitation from President Hu Jintao to visit Beijing later this year.
On the sidelines of the G20, Obama had one-on-one talks with his counterparts from around the world, meeting many of them for the very first time. He discussed a new arms treaty with Russia and pledged better relations with China. But how about Iran? Well, its leaders weren't at the G20, but they were at a conference in The Hague this week where they held rare, direct talks with US envoy Richard Holbrooke. US officials downplayed the meeting, though, so don't look for Obama to add Tehran to his overseas itinerary anytime soon. And crowds in London followed Obama's every move. Newspapers celebrated the Obama style, not Barack Obama, but Michelle. It is fair to say frenzy over the US First Lady stole the show. Michelle Obama's London charm offensive began at 10 Downing Street, this J.Crew ensemble grabbing attention for its style and affordability. Later, during a visit with the Queen, the world was treated to the hug. A breach of protocol? No. According to the palace, this was a mutual and spontaneous display of affection and appreciation. Understandably, comparisons are being made to Jacqueline Kennedy's European visit in 1961, when the First Lady charmed the continent and Americans alike.
We so often look at what a First Lady does in our own country, but the truth of the matter is what they do overseas really makes them literally figures of world power and influence.
So, high scores for Michelle Obama's debut on the world stage? Most think so, and the US needs all the help it can get to change the perception of Americans. After all, you can bet the world is watching every move. In family politics, who wouldn't like to move into a free house with $100,000 to fix it up? The government gives new US presidents $100,000 to decorate their private living quarters and the Oval Office, but the Obamas have turned down the money in light of the sagging economy and outrage over corporate excesses. The first couple will pay for everything themselves instead. A new rug is often the priciest presidential purchase. Former President George W. Bush dropped more than $60,000 on his.
I love this rug.
Yeah. President Obama likes it too and says he'll keep it. If he ever wants a different look, he can always pull the rug out and expose the hardwood floors underneath. Tempting for a president who likes basketball. And Drive American is the signal coming from the White House with Obama's keys in the ignition of the nation's auto industry. But the president's team must have missed the memo. Politico.com did a street-side survey on West Executive Drive, where White House West Wingers park their rides, and its editors found only 5 American cars out of 23. They spotted 1 Dodge Grand Caravan, 2 Ford Escapes, a Jeep Cherokee, and a Cadillac, sprinkled among mostly imported cars, Hondas, Toyotas, Saabs, Audis, Beamers and Benzes, among others. An earlier survey by the Detroit News found that even members of Obama's auto industry task force prefer imports. Could be an indication of why the US auto industry is in trouble. At least the official presidential limo, a Cadillac, is made in the USA. In office politics, here's one way Obama can reduce the federal deficit: find some more nominees with tax troubles. His choice for Health Secretary Kathleen Sebelius has become the latest administration nominee to settle up an old tax bill. She repaid about $7,000 just before her Senate confirmation hearings began this week. Her payment, together with the back taxes paid by 4 other Obama nominees, means the US Treasury is now about $190,000 richer. A small dent in the deficit and a big inspiration for auditors everywhere. In the quick fix now, are there benefits to your nephew becoming president? Zaytuna Onyango, the half-sister of Barack Obama's father, will get to stay in the US for now after an immigration judge delayed her deportation case.
This is one of the first time that any sitting president has had a relative come before the immigration courts.
The Kenyan woman has been living illegally in the US at a Boston public housing complex since a judge rejected her asylum request in 2004 and ordered her out. The White House says Obama has not gotten involved in the case. There's no winner yet in a special congressional election in New York, but there could be a clear loser: the Republican Party. The race was widely considered a referendum on the Obama administration's policies, but the race is still too close to call, so some political observers have concluded that there's no big voter backlash against the president and his party. With the 2010 midterm elections right around the corner, the GOP is hoping this special election is a special case. And they were running mates last year, but this week, former presidential candidate John McCain was asked if he'd support Sarah Palin for president in 2012.
Would you like to see Sarah Palin become president?
I'd like to see her compete. There's a lot of good, fresh talent out there.
Would you support Palin?
Oh, I'd have to see who the candidates are.
Not exactly a ringing endorsement. Coming up, 20 world leaders with 200 fingers. Which ones are pointing at the United States? Welcome back. Well, heading into this week's summit, leaders across the globe were taking aim at the US. Strong words, strong rhetoric, all saying one thing: America, it's your fault. Here's Tom Foreman.
From Moscow to Munich, from Beijing to Bogota, the game is blame the United States. On the attack, China, which says America went in blind pursuit of profit, which led to recession. The European Union, where the stimulus was called the road to hell. And Brazil, where the president said the world economy tanked because of blue-eyed people who knew nothing. But keeping them honest, is America really to blame for all of this? Yes.
Wall Street screwed up. Everybody knows that.
And no, according to Sebastian Mallaby with the Council on Foreign Relations.
So, for example, European banks were delighted to buy US-originated subprime securities. And that's why some of the losses from the US financial blow-up ended up on the balance sheets of European banks.
They were happy about it when it was working.
Sure, they were happy with it. Exactly. And now they turn around and say, gee, it's your financial model that messed up. But in fact, they bought into that financial model.
Dozens of nations did that. When the money was flowing, even communist China, which now owns more U.S. debt than any other country, was eager to loan billions to America as U.S. consumers bought up Chinese exports, the same consumers that China now says should have saved more. Along with Russia, China is now even pushing for the U.S. dollar to be replaced as the global currency. But President Obama insists there is no rift separating the G20 nations.
I can't be clearer in saying that there are no sides.
Political and economic analysts say there is a good reason for him to take that stance, because many of his sharpest foreign critics are in deep political trouble back home. And if he publicly lets them grandstand a little at his expense, privately they may give more support to his global recovery plan. Tom Foreman, CNN, Washington.
Well, for more on the blame game now, we turn to Republican strategist and CNN contributor Ed Rylands in New York and Democratic strategist Zara Buck in Washington. Thanks for talking with us. Ed, I want to start with you. What do you make of this finger pointing toward the U.S.?
You know, I think to a certain extent even the president himself said, you know, we are certainly a little bit to blame for some of the world economy. We've spent an awful lot of money that we didn't have. But at the end of the day, it's a worldwide recession, and I think he made a very superb presentation. He's a great goodwill ambassador. I think he more than effectively handled himself, and I think he kept at bay the very significant efforts by the Germans and the French to put in a super regulatory mechanism that would never be acceptable to American companies.
Zara, what do you think?
Well, it depends on what you attribute the crisis to. If you attribute it to solely the housing market, then certainly the U.S. is certainly to blame in that. If you contribute it to possibly some of the more riskier investors, some of the overzealous investments that have occurred globally, then there's enough blame to go all the way around.
Ed, back to you. What do you think? This first test on the world stage for Obama, how did he go?
Superb. I think he did very, very well. I say this not as a Republican, I say this as an American. I mean, he made me very proud. I think he's a tremendous performer, and I think with other world leaders, this was their first test of being opposite him on the table, and I think he did very, very well.
Zara, what score would you give him?
I think he had a perfect 10. You know, this is his element that he was certainly in. He was very comfortable. He was very self-assured. He wanted to send a resounding message that there was a change of policy and that the U.S. was open to working on the global stage.
Ed, there is a lot of anti-American sentiment out there, particularly across Europe, it has to be said. Do you think anything President Obama said could have changed that?
No, I think you have to differentiate between the people of Europe, many of who have great admiration for this man and are looking for a new day, and we're happy the Bush administration was over, versus the leaders of some of these countries who basically differ significantly with our policy, whether it's our borrowing substantial sums of money to fund our stimulus program or our debt, or basically our war efforts in Afghanistan and Iraq. There's still a lot of unhappiness about that.
And Zara, you get the last word. What do you think? Any changes to anti-American sentiment or not?
Yes, I think certainly so. I mean, you saw President Obama reach out to Sarkozy and as well as Merkel, even though they weren't necessarily very cozy to the economic stimulus plans of the U.S. and to this financial rescue plan, but they certainly were open to the ideas once they had an opportunity to talk and voice their concerns.
Zara Buck and Ed Rollins, thanks to both of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, shifting gears a bit now, will there be a big shift in US policy toward Cuba? With President Obama in the White House, a key group of senators is giving it one more shot. They're taking aim at the long-standing travel ban, rules that effectively stop nearly all US citizens from setting foot on the island. If Senate Democrat Byron Dorgan's Freedom to Travel to Cuba Act passes, all restrictions for Americans visiting the communist nation would be lifted.
Seems to me if something has failed for nearly 5 decades, you might want to take a look at it again and see whether you should modify it.
Cuban Americans in Congress, like Senate Democrat Bob Menendez, are opposed.
The government is pure and simple, a brutal dictatorship. The average Cuban worker lives on an income of less than $1 a day.
But the bill has the support of Republican Senator Richard Lugar, whose foreign policy views have had a big influence on President Obama, the first US president who's younger than the Castro regime. Elsewhere in the political world, it took weeks for Israel's new Prime Minister to build his coalition government, but carpenters had just a few hours to build a table big enough to seat everyone. Sworn in Tuesday, Benjamin Netanyahu now heads the country's largest government ever. Carpenters had to work overnight on Monday to enlarge the cabinet table so all 38 members had a place to sit. Well, with Netanyahu's predecessor Ehud Olmert out of the picture, there's a new contender for the world's most unpopular elected official. Ukrainian President Viktor Yushchenko's approval rating is less than 5%, heading into national elections later this year. He wants to push back the vote from October to January to buy himself more time. He's also calling for presidents to be limited to a single term. It's unclear whether he meant that to apply to himself, although if his poll numbers don't improve, he may not have a choice. And not much of a honeymoon for Malaysia's new Prime Minister. He'll face his first test at the polls 2 days after taking office. Deputy Premier Najib Razak assumed the top job after Prime Minister Abdullah Ahmad Badawi resigned this week. Local elections this weekend are seen as a barometer of his support, giving him just 48 hours to make a good first impression. After the break, dumping the dollar, does the US have plans in the works? We'll check the truthometer. That's next. Welcome back. Time for one of our favourite segments of the program now, when we sort political fact from fiction with the all-knowing, all-wise Bill Adair, editor-in-chief of PolitiFact.com, the man who brings us the truthometer. Well, thanks, Bill. Let's jump right in here. And US House Republican Michelle Bachmann from Minnesota said Secretary Geithner has left the option on the table of abandoning the dollar for a multinational currency. True or false?
Congresswoman Bachmann has suggested that he wanted to abandon the dollar as the U.S. currency. And the only thing that he said was that he was open to looking at a discussion of a different international reserve currency, but it's not like Americans would stop using the dollar. And Geithner then, soon after that, rejected the idea anyway. So that one got a false on the truthometer.
All right. Here's one from the House Republican Conference. I'll read it out to you. The administration raises revenue for nationalized health care through a series of new taxes, including a light switch tax that could cost every American household $3,128. True or false?
It's wrong in a couple of ways. The original statement said that they were going to pay for nationalized health care with this revenue, and that's not true. President Obama does not support nationalized health care. His health care program uses the existing private health insurance system as its foundation. But the other part is also very wrong. That number, what he's trying to say, what the conference is trying to say, is that the president's climate change cap and trade program would cost families $3,100 per year. They based that on an MIT study, but here's the trick. The author of that study told us it was wrong for the Republicans to say that, and even told the Republicans that, but they continued to do it. So that one earns a pants on fire.
All right, and moving on, this is our final one, Bill. From the Cato Institute, in fact, saying there has been no net global warming for over a decade now. True or false on that one?
Cato is citing one study and really cherry-picking here. When you look at climate change, it's important to look even beyond a decade's worth of numbers and look at many at a much longer period of time. So by even relying on a study that says 10 years is not scientifically the right approach. But beyond that, we looked at some numbers using the 4 most common indices for measuring climate change, and they did show an increase, a slight increase over the last 10 years. So the Cato Institute gets a false. All
right, all very interesting. Bill Adair, pleasure to talk to you. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
Time to answer the mail. Kenneth from South Africa asks, does President Obama pay for his own food and drink in the White House and pay to entertain guests? Or does the government foot the bill? Waiter, check please. The president does pay for regular meals and to entertain private guests. He gets a monthly bill from the White House usher's office, and it's not cheap, sort of like ordering every meal from hotel room service. George W. Bush said one of his biggest surprises as president was getting his first food bill. Now, state dinners are different. The State Department picks up the whole tab, and the president gets an entertainment budget of $19,000 a year to cover non-state events like birthday parties and White House movie screenings. But for regular meals, family gifts, clothing and personal services like dry cleaning and haircuts, the president is stuck with the bill. And Nelson from Nigeria had this quick query for us. Does the US president have the power to decide to live elsewhere in Washington other than the White House? To answer this one, we reached out to the US Secret Service, those no-nonsense agents responsible for the president's personal protection. Their reply? In short, no. Adding, let us know if you need anything more. Signed, the US Secret Service. Just the facts, ma'am. We couldn't think of more fitting response. If you have a question, visit our website, cnn.com/politicalman, or email us at politicalman@cnn.com. And for Obama, it was a question of protocol and perception. What do you get the woman who has everything, especially when the whole world is watching? Long before he arrived in London, Obama's gift-giving reputation preceded him. The British press howled last month when he gave a set of DVDs to British Prime Minister Gordon Brown. So what did he bring for Queen Elizabeth? An iPod. It was thoughtfully loaded with the Queen's favourite show tunes and video from her most recent visit to the US, but some still question that choice. It's the latest blow to a man with present problems, even among his own family. A Chicago gossip columnist once reported that Michelle Obama returned the birthday earrings her husband gave her last year. And Obama once told a magazine that he doesn't give birthday presents to his daughters at all. Compared to nothing, those DVDs and the iPod don't sound so bad after all. And that is our program for this week. Join us next time on Political Man.
Sie sehen Live-Bilder aus Tschechien, genauer gesagt von der Prager Burg. Hier ist US-Präsident Barack Obama vor gut einer Stunde angekommen, begrüßt und empfangen von tausenden Menschen, die sehr gespannt seine Rede erwarten. Bis jetzt hatte er sich zu einem 6-Augen-Gespräch mit dem tschechischen Präsidenten Václav Klaus und dem Ministerpräsidenten Topolánek zurückgezogen. Und sobald er mit seiner Rede beginnt, werden wir diese natürlich hier bei NTV live übertragen und Sie können sie dann mitverfolgen. Bis dahin, erstmal herzlich willkommen zu den 10 Uhr Nachrichten hier bei NTV am 5. April. Ich bin Christiane Stein, ganz herzlich willkommen. Ja, und wir zeigen Ihnen Bilder, die uns am Morgen erreicht haben und den Besuch Obamas in Prag überschatten. Nordkorea hat heute am frühen Morgen eine Rakete gestartet und über Japan fliegen lassen. Damit verschärfen sie die Spannungen in der Region gewaltig. Die USA, Japan und Südkorea verurteilten die eigenmächtige Aktion. US-Präsident Barack Obama, der in diesen Minuten auf der Prager Burg ist, äußerte sich auch schon am Morgen. Der Start dieser Rakete sei eine klare Verletzung der UN-Resolution. Eigentlich wollte er in seiner Rede heute zum Thema atomare Abrüstung sprechen. Doch nun wird diese vom Abschuss der Rakete in Nordkorea geprägt sein und demnach auch Thema seiner Ausführungen werden. Ja, mit diesem provokativen Akt hat das Land seine internationalen Verpflichtungen missachtet und unmissverständliche Aufrufe zur Zurückhaltung ignoriert und sich weiter von der Gemeinschaft der Völker isoliert. So sieht Obama das Ganze.
Raketentest in Nordkorea. Am frühen Morgen startet eine Langstreckenrakete, fliegt direkt über Japan hinweg, wie hier auf Archivbildern in Richtung Pazifik. Eine klare Provokation nicht nur für Südkorea und Japan, auch für die USA. Und eine Bedrohung, denn sicher ist, Japan befindet sich in Reichweite des Geschosses Nordkoreas. Ich bin erleichtert, dass die Rakete nicht auf uns gestürzt ist, aber das ist schon alles sehr bedrohlich. Ja, schockiert sind wir, dass die Rakete genau über uns drüber geflogen ist. Der Zeitpunkt wohl kein Zufall. US-Präsident Obama war am Morgen in Prag angekommen, um dort vor den Staats- und Regierungschefs der EU für eine atomwaffenfreie Welt zu werben. Ausgerechnet jetzt die Meldung des Raketenstarts der Nordkoreaner, nachdem sie diesen bereits gestern angekündigt, dann aber wegen angeblich schlechter Wetterbedingungen verschoben hatten. Damit isoliere sich das Land weiter, verurteilt Obama den Start. Nordkorea habe seine internationalen Verpflichtungen missachtet. Und auch Japan reagiert, bringt Raketenabwehrsysteme vor dem Verteidigungsministerium in Stellung. Auf See patrouillieren Kriegsschiffe. Am US-Luftwaffenstützpunkt in Okinawa starten Aufklärungsflugzeuge in Richtung Nordkorea. Wie das Militär ist auch die Politik in Alarmbereitschaft. Wir müssen jetzt dafür sorgen, dass unsere Nation sicher ist, und wir müssen Informationen sammeln, wir alle gemeinsam. Wir fordern den Weltsicherheitsrat auf, in einer Sondersitzung zusammenzukommen. Ich werde mich außerdem bald mit den Außenministern der USA und Südkoreas beraten. Nach eigener Aussage will Nordkorea mit der Rakete einen Satelliten in die Erdumlaufbahn schicken. Die USA, Südkorea und Japan fürchten jedoch einen weiteren Test militärischer Langstreckenraketen. Ein klarer Verstoß gegen UN-Resolutionen.
Mein Kollege Lothar Keller ist für uns in Prag. Lothar, Obama hatte heute schon eine Menge zu tun. Er musste sich zum Raketenabschuss Nordkoreas äußern. Was weiß man vor Ort darüber?
Nun, Obama wird ja gleich hier vor der Prager Burg eine Rede halten vor etwa 20.000, 30.000 Menschen, wo es vor allem um Abrüstung gehen soll. Diese Rede wird natürlich überschattet durch den Raketentest der Nordkoreaner. Gleichzeitig aber kommt dieser Test auch fast zur richtigen Zeit. Er unterstützt jedenfalls Obamas Forderungen, die er hier aufstellen wird, nukleares Material in der ganzen Welt besser zu überwachen. Denn heutzutage kann eben niemand mehr genau sagen, in welche Hände dieses Material geraten wird. Siehe Iran, siehe Nordkorea. Obama hat Nordkorea aufgefordert, sich an die UN-Resolutionen zu halten und die Welt nicht weiter zu provozieren. Heute Nachmittag wird der UN-Sicherheitsrat tagen. Man muss sehen, ob es weitere Sanktionen geben wird. Sanktionen könnten zur Folge haben, dass die Gespräche über das nordkoreanische Atomprogramm mit den Nordkoreanern von Pyongyang abgebrochen werden. Und das wäre sicherlich nicht im Sinne von Obama.
Kommen wir mal zu der Stimmung vor Ort. Man sieht wahnsinnig viele Menschen, die haben Fähnchen in der Hand. Kann man diesen Auftritt von Barack Obama vergleichen mit dem Besuch in Berlin damals in Deutschland?
Nun, sicherlich kann man es miteinander vergleichen. Der Unterschied ist eben, dass Obama jetzt Präsident ist. Damals war er nur Kandidat. Insofern kommt dieser Rede natürlich noch eine ganz besondere Bedeutung bei. Es ist ein wunderbarer Ort hier, dieser große Platz vor der Prager Burg, ein historischer Ort. Hier sind auch direkt vor der Bühne, wo wir auch stehen, sehr viele Fähnchen verteilt worden, tschechische und amerikanische. Die Menschen jubeln kaum, dass sie sich selber hier auch auf den Fernsehleinwänden sehen und sind natürlich alle voller Hoffnung, dass der US-Präsident jetzt gleich auch selber kommen wird. Die Rede war für 10 Uhr angekündigt. Er ist etwas verspätet eben hier auf der Burg angekommen, wo er sich jetzt noch mit dem tschechischen Staatspräsidenten und dem Ministerpräsidenten trifft. Bis jetzt auf der Bühne hier steht sein Pult mit dem Siegel des US-Präsidenten dabei und dahinter ein Sicherheitsmann. Sicherheit spielt natürlich eine große Rolle hier bei diesem Auftritt. Vor wunderbarer Kulisse dahinter die Altstadt von Prag, die aber noch etwas im Nebel verschwindet.
Wie sieht es aus mit den Sicherheitsvorkehrungen? Barack Obama war gestern schon mit seiner Frau Michelle angereist und auch in der Stadt unterwegs gewesen, essen gewesen. Was musste man da alles für Vorkehrungen treffen?
Nun, die Sicherheitsvorkehrungen sind wie immer hoch und das ist auch wie immer natürlich eine Belastung für eine solche Stadt. Heute Morgen war eine wichtige Straße gesperrt, damit der Präsident von seinem Hotel hier zur Burg fahren konnte. Aber ich muss sagen, auch gestern, wenn man durch die Stadt gelaufen ist, das war schon alles recht gelassen. Die Polizei war überall präsent, aber es gab ansonsten keine besonderen Straßensperren oder Vorkehrungen. Der Luftraum wird natürlich überwacht, vor allem von den Amerikanern mit Hilfe der Tschechen. Und rings um den Präsidenten drumherum ist natürlich immer dieser große Cordon von seinen eigenen Sicherheitsleuten, die sind auch hier auf dem Radstehen überall präsent, überwachen die Kontrolle derer, die hier auf den Platz kommen wollen, die üblichen Sicherheitsvorkehrungen, man muss sich abtasten lassen und die Taschen abgeben, aber das Ganze ist im Rahmen des Üblichen und eigentlich relativ entspannt, weil man hier auch nicht mit Demonstrationen, gar mit Gewalttätigen rechnet, so wie wir das in den letzten Tagen in Straßburg oder Kiel gesehen haben.
Vielen Dank erstmal für den Moment und wir werden, sobald es losgeht, nochmal zu Ihnen rüberschalten und mit der Rede beginnen. Dankeschön erstmal, Lothar Keller.
Bitte.
He's going to be referring to what happened this morning.
Yes, he's almost certainly going to be referring to North Korea. He's going to outline a very ambitious program indeed, possibly the most ambitious program of his administration, that is to rid the world of nuclear weapons. He'll be talking about slashing America's arsenal of nuclear weapons, talking about having tighter controls over nuclear materials to stop those falling to the hands of terror groups. And he'll be talking also about a whole range of global agreements that are necessary to keep control of nuclear weapons and to reduce them ultimately, things like the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. He'll be talking about tightening that. And he'll be calling for a global nuclear conference to talk about nuclear security. So he's due to outline a whole range of ideas to achieve this dream of a non-nuclear world.
Okay, Steve Rosenberg in Prague, thank you very much. No doubt we'll be talking to Steve as the day progresses here on BBC World News. This is the scene as we wait for President Obama to take to the stage at the Hraganské Náměstí Square near Prague Castle, his first public speech in Europe since his inauguration as US President. Of course, he has been speaking at the NATO summit yesterday. Plenty of people, crowds in their hundreds and thousands waiting to hear what Mr. Obama has to say. Let's hear what Roland Burke has to say now. He's our Tokyo correspondent about this missile test that was launched this morning. What has the reaction been from Tokyo, Roland?
Well, Japan said that the launch was profoundly regrettable and it has strongly protested against it. And Japan has also called for an urgent meeting of the United Nations Security Council to take place later. What happened here was that shortly after 2:30 GMT, the government announced that its monitoring stations and its destroyers at sea that were closely looking at that launch pad in the east of North Korea had spotted a blast off. Then a few minutes later, came another announcement from the Japanese government that the rocket had passed over Japanese territory with booster stages falling into the sea to the west and to the east. Japan had deployed Patriot missile interceptors to the north of Japan and to Tokyo as well as destroyers at sea, and they had orders to shoot down anything that threatened to crash onto Japanese territory in the event of the launch going wrong, but in the end they didn't have to fire.
What would Tokyo like to see happen now? Because this is a perennial problem, how to deal with North Korea. Nothing seems to make any difference to its actions.
Well, I think the parties that are going to the United Nations Security Council will want to see sanctions against North Korea, their implementation tightened up. The possibility of getting further sanctions through might be difficult. It depends on what China thinks about it. For its part, Japan has already talked about extending its own bilateral sanctions, its own unilateral sanctions rather, against North Korea. They were due to expire on April the 13th, but they're now likely to be extended for another year.
What about the six-party Avis disarmament talks? Of course, Japan is part of those. Are there calls where you are for those just to end or to be reinvigorated? What?
No, I think the United States and its allies, including Japan, would like in the long term for the six-party talks aiming at the denuclearization of North Korea to continue, to be resumed. At the moment they are stalled. But the immediate question is going to be the international response to this rocket launch and whether there can be a coordinated response to that to put more pressure on North Korea.
Roland Burke in Tokyo, thank you. Let's go to Beijing now. Michael Bristow is there for us. Michael, is there any sense of frustration, perhaps, that North Korea has gone ahead with this launch today?
Well, if the Chinese leadership are frustrated about this rocket launch today, they're certainly not telling the world. After it occurred earlier on today, they put out, the Foreign Ministry put out a statement, but it was only a 4-line statement, and it was really just said that all sides should remain calm and really take a step back and not go off and start talking about sanctions, that kind of thing. It really wants to calm the situation down. It's not yet clear, really, whether China would support sanctions, but it's worth noting that this comment was rather mooted previously in 2006 when North Korea had a nuclear experiment. China was furious, and it said so. On this occasion, it hasn't said so. That would lead us to suspect that perhaps it doesn't support any further sanctions against North Korea. And an important point here, which has been made in China, is that this rocket launch, North Korea said it was supposedly carrying an experimental satellite. Now, I think from China's point of view, if that has been the case, then it would be more less aggressive and antagonistic against North Korea. If this rocket launch, however, was just shown to be that, a rocket launch, then China would perhaps have a harder position towards North Korea.
Just how much influence does Beijing have on Pyongyang?
That's a very, very difficult question to answer because North Korea doesn't say anything about that, and neither does China. But it certainly is the case that these two countries are very close allies. They have been for a long time. China sent thousands of troops to help fight the Korean War on behalf of North Korea in the 1950s. And Chinese Chairman Mao, the former leader, famously said once that these two countries were like lips and teeth. Now, the relationship between these two countries isn't as strong at the moment, but certainly China is a firm friend of North Korea. It provides it with a lot of economic aid, a lot of diplomatic support. It doesn't want anything which happens in North Korea spilling out over into China. The two countries share a common border. So certainly, whatever influence it has, it will be using all that influence over the coming days to try and bring North Korea back into the six-party negotiations, those talks aimed at looking at getting rid of North Korea's nuclear capabilities, and that's where China's energies will be directed over the next few days.
Michael Bristow in Beijing, thank you very much indeed. Let me just take you now back to Hryhorantski Nemeshti Square by Prague Castle, where President Obama is due to speak about the launch this morning in North Korea and also about the nuclear weapons, and he's outlining his vision of a world free of nuclear weapons in this speech. As you can see, thousands of people have turned out just to hear Mr. Obama speak in public, his first public speech since he took the presidency. So we shall be joining that just as soon as Mr. Obama takes to the stage.